I'll hand it over to you, and then you can amaze our audience with the slides and the chat. I think it makes sense if we wait a couple of more minutes, maybe 2 minutes. So in the meantime, people can join who are just coming off of meetings. Okay, can you put it up to a slideshow to see how it looks? Awesome. Okay, can you stop sharing?
Put it in like slideshow presenter view. How does that look?
Now we see your Chrome browser on top, and
yeah, it's okay. I may want to like open up some URLs. Is that okay?
I guess I prefer you not, or like you can escape and then go to another and then open that. I think it looks, yeah. Anytime you want to open something, you can just escape and then check that.
Cool.
Or unless it's really uncomfortable, then we do it how you feel like.
Awesome. Let me know when you guys are ready.
All right. Can you stop sharing? I'll give it back to you. It's for, yeah. Can you stop sharing, Rick?
What was that?
Can you stop sharing for a second?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thanks a lot. All right, we can start in a minute. All right, let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Supernova workshop. My name is Andrew, and I work in DSCVT as a developer relations engineer. Today, we have Rick Porter, the CEO and co-founder of Discover, and the man who famously hates vowels, and the man who built the largest social media network on the internet computer. Welcome, Rick. Thank you very much for joining us. And last message to our audience, be sure to ask questions to Rick. We'll have a live Q&A session. Whenever you have some interesting questions, I'll shout it out and Rick can answer it.
Awesome.
You can share the screen and let's jump in.
Cool. Hey, what's up, everybody? How does my screen look?
Perfect.
Cool. So this is a quick workshop. We're going to be going over NFT standards. And we're going to be talking about SocialFi a bit too. And so I took NFT standard from a super high level. What's important is like, when I think about NFTs, I really think about how are we displaying them? How are we rendering them? Like, what is the user actually doing with them? Because on Discover, we want to render them first. We want to display them. So when you think about when I think about NFT standards, typically you always have transfer, balance of, owner of, total supply, mint, metadata. There's all these other typical endpoints that you might get, or service calls that you might get from an NFT. And this is true for pretty much any protocol that has an implementation of an NFT. But what becomes unique in the internet computer world is you've got the HTTP request. Like, how do you actually call this NFT? How do you actually render this NFT? You typically have some sort of registry. Like, where's that data? How's the data stored? Like, where does the data actually, or not data, but the ownership table actually exists? Like, who owns what? Right. And there's a couple options on the internet computer for this, but it's pretty interesting. And then marketplace tools, like, how do we get liquidity for our NFT? Does the NFT actually host the marketplace within inside of the NFT, which is completely unique to the internet computer? Like, the NFT is a marketplace itself. Or is the NFT pretty basic? Does it just have all your typical endpoints plus some of the internet computer endpoints? So let's just look at both of these and see what kind of impact they make. So HTTP request, super straightforward. You have your NFTs and you have different types of render targets. Is it an image, like a PNG, a JPEG? Is it a vector graphic? Well, an SVG. Is it a video, like MP4? Is it a website? So is it like rendering CSS and HTML? Maybe a bunch of other things. Is it a 3D object or scene? So is it like an actual OBJ file that gets sent back and the user is responsible for rendering it? But from like a consumer perspective, like a discover perspective, the reason we care about all these is like we need to be able to provide the user with a rich experience to be able to display this NFT simply and easily. So when we think about what NFT standard you're using, our next question is how do we display it? If it's an image, it's pretty simple, right? It's just a PNG or JPEG, but and then we can just render that right to the front end. For SVGs, so for vector graphics, it becomes a little bit more complex. You just can't always display an SVG, and it's also a little bit dangerous to render SVGs on untrusted SVGs on random websites. SVGs can actually contain JavaScript. So you've got to be careful when rendering SVGs. So, like the famous OpenSea hack is someone put JavaScript into an SVG, which would then transfer people's NFTs to their wallet, which is like, it's a pretty, they followed all the rules, right? And it's by creating these like trusted environments or untrusted environments we're like it's up to the creator to kind of like create that trust. Well, with an SVG, it's typically easier just to display an SVG as using an image tag in HTML and then seeing what happens. But for us, from a discover perspective, we need to make sure that we can actually render it to the user. And I would say 90% of SVGs or 90% of NFTs on the IC right now are SVGs. So we typically display them in an image tag. So if there's any JavaScript within it, it doesn't get executed. But this kind of creates a layer of complexity because with SVGs, image tags can display an SVG, but image tags can't display an SVG with an embedded SVG. So like an example of this would be, we go to Entrepot and go to the marketplace and go to the first bot we see, we view it on chain. So it's like we view the page source. And if you look at this, right, you can actually see that these SVGs, so this bot here is an SVG within an SVG, right? So, and this is due to the size limitations of the canister. So you only get so much storage, and so you can only store so much memory within these canisters. And so they have to partition this out to a bunch of different canisters. So there's this SVG is actually an SVG with an image embedded into it. And if you jump into that, here's the actual image that's stored inside of the SVG. So it's like a wrapper SVG. But when you actually try to display this on Discover, it doesn't show up. It just shows up as a failed load. So what is useful with their HTTP requests is that they have this thing called type equals thumbnail. And this gives us an actual image of the SVG itself. So the thumbnail of it is actually stored on chain. So no matter what kind of NFT you're working with and you're trying to render it correctly, and you're trying to create a standard so that it can be quickly and easily shareable on the web, you want to actually create it so that it has these types of thumbnails in it. So for these different types of formats, right, you want to make sure that if you use a render target that's not an image, that's a vector graphic, that's a video, that's a website, that's a 3D object or scene, you got to think, how are people going to share it? And how are people going to render it? And so for vector graphics, EXT by Tonic has done a great job of providing thumbnails. But like, how would a thumbnail work for a video NFT? How would a thumbnail work for a website NFT? How would a thumbnail work for a 3D object NFT? So when you're creating your HTTP request, you got to think about how are people going to share it? The next part is the registry. So we talked about something, another part unique about the IC is that, you can store the entire registry on chain and make it simple to display. And like, why do you need the registry? Like, how do you actually have the history of an NFT? Like, and a common thing on Discover all the time is, I transferred my NFT, but I've never arrived. I know I typed in the address correctly. I don't think they typed the address in correctly, but there's no way to prove it, right? So you need some sort of provenance with this. And EXT, DIP 721, both of them have integrations with certified asset provenance, which is CAP by Fleek, but both of them actually contain a registry. So you should be able to get that registry. Another value add of having the registry itself is getting gating on chain, right? So for EXT is get registry. This is the big trick on how Discover actually gates our portals, right? Is we're able to grab the registry, which contains the entire ownership table of an NFT, and we're able to pull that data in and determine who owns what in real time. So this is another thought of like, if you're building an NFT on the IC, how do you make it simple for applications like Discover who are providing gating to actually quickly just figure out who owns what? And I know what you're thinking. Oh, what about, like, we just talked about owner of, right? So there's this one right here, owner of, but do you really want to call that, for every single user every single time? Because, NFTs are real time. People are trading them. People are trading them, selling them, buying them, whatever. So how do you know in real time who owns what without the user having to click a button to perform an action? You want to constantly have this table updated. So Git registry for us is something very useful because we're able to determine quickly of our users who want to be discovered, like who owns what in real time. And CAP by Psychedelic DAO does the exact same thing, right? It contains a complete provenance of the history of an NFT, which we can also listen to on chain and determine who owns what in real time. So both of these are really useful, but if you're creating an NFT, think about how are people going to gate with this NFT? How are you going to add more utility to your NFT? And as this point in time right now, and we're watching blue chip NFTs, blue chips are not doing super well, but a lot of NFTs with utility are doing well. So this type of functionality gives utility and integration into your NFT. It makes it simple to work with. And another question too is, this is for the community. Are you a builder right now? How would we have a master registry on the IC for all NFTs? If you think about it, the current Poke Studio bots registry is only 500 kilobytes. We get 8 gigabytes of storage on the IC. I think it's super possible to have a master registry of all NFTs that can somehow determine who owns what globally in real time. It's a bigger question. There's a lot of research that's going into better use of stable storage, which is a whole nother conversation, but it's definitely going to be possible on the IC to have completely on-chain gating technology using these NFT standards. But I think if you're building an NFT, you got to really think about how are you going to actually implement these types of standards to make it simple to integrate with, add that utility. Marketplace tools. Is your NFT on any or outie? This is another big question too, is where does the marketplace actually sit? Where does the marketplace actually exist? And so EXT, that's definitely an any, right? Entire marketplace exists within the NFT. So the NFT standard itself actually contains a bunch of endpoints for our service calls for marketplace tools. So that means the whole marketplace exists in the NFT, right? Now that makes, does that make it easier or harder from an outside perspective? Like if I'm integrating with this NFT, do I care? And the answer is kind of honestly, it's it makes it simpler. Like if the whole marketplace exists with the NFT and within the NFT, from an external perspective, from a utility perspective, from a Discover perspective, I have to do way less work to integrate your marketplace into an NFT. So from an NFT standard perspective, it's way easier if the marketplace exists inside the NFT, because that's less things that I have to actually do to build these tools on top of it. But maybe with DIP 721, which is an Audi, the NFT marketplace would exist outside of the NFT. How does that empower the user differently? How does that reduce the amount of bloat that sits within an NFT? Like, how much work do we really want our NFTs to actually do to be supported for marketplaces? So from a discover or external perspective, if you're building an application on top of these NFTs, you may have to like transfer the ownership. You may have to wrap this NFT into some sort of other standard which contains the marketplace tools. But there's less bloat within the NFT. There's less functionality within inside of the NFT. I think that creates a different paradigm where there's less focus on creating all this functionality with an NFT and kind of treating it like a crypto primitive, a non-fungible token that has its typical API calls. But I think there's no better standard. Like any or Audi for marketplace tools for NFTs doesn't truly impact us in any way. And we got some questions. Let me check them out. Yeah, you could get a hash of the official. And so one of the questions is like, how could we the hash of the official NFT? Like you could make sure it hasn't changed. And that's really the trust mechanic, right? Like they're basically saying if the NFT, you deploy the NFT, it has its SVG format, right? And you've trusted this user. It's Poke Studio. You trust them 100%, right? But like, you don't have to trust them explicitly in this scenario. So if they have an SVG, you already have a hash of the SVG, and you'll know if there's been any changes to the SVG after you've received it. So if it changes in the future, maybe there's an approval process to redisplay it. And that's an interesting scenario. Like SVGs are extremely powerful. And, you see people building actual games inside of their SVG NFT. And I think that was snakes. I see snakes, but like, it's executing JavaScript in an untrusted environment, which is like the whole point of blockchain is like, you don't have to explicitly trust the user, but you can trust the code. And so there's got to be checks and balances in place to actually trust that code. And I think I'm missing some steps here, but the idea is that maybe there's ways that when a project launches, there's a hash that this project generates to see if there's been any changes to reevaluate if this code can be trusted or not. But it's a good question. And I think for these, going back to marketplace tools, I don't think there's a better answer here. Like, I'm sure jelly.xyz is possibly going to be by you transfer the NFT to some sort of wallet, and then you have you can trade and buy that NFT with inside of that wallet. But that's not like we have no gas fees. It's a reverse gas model on the internet computer. So the paradigm of transferring, there's no cost involved. So what does it matter to the end user? Is it just another step they have to make? That's a good question. Let me see here. So I want to go back to this concept of internet identity creates domain-driven wallets. So we've talked about, like, do we care if we transfer the NFT? So we have a website. It grabs the internet identity, which generates a principal, right? The concept here is that once you have a user's principal, you can instantly start talking to the EXT standard, the DIP standard, or the CCC standard. And they implement transfers, tokens. Tokens actually grabs the user's tokens. CCC has a little bit of extra stuff. They have claim, which is like, it actually gives you a random NFT at the claim period instead of at the mint period. And it's EXT based. So it's based off the EXT standard. But what's important that if you're developing an integration into or NFTs on the IC, their principal still has access to, like, you can just transfer these NFTs to anybody's principal. And as long as the principal, wherever it's been generated and the website that it's on, as long as you support EXT, DIP 721 or CCC, you can still interface directly with that NFT. And if you use Stoic or Plug Login, it makes this process a lot easier. But it's still very possible that any website on the IC that uses internet identity or uses Plug or Stoic has direct access to these NFTs. So you could just implement these specific standards on your platform and they'll start showing up. And this is how Discover works. You know, Discover.1 uses internet identity. The user gets a principal, and you can just transfer and send NFTs from that exact principal on Discover. And all we've done is implemented the EXT, the DIP standard, and the CCC standard. It's super simple. And if you're developing an application, you can use the same pattern. Now you get access to all these different standards of NFTs. And I want to point out there's actually dapp.js. I don't use it as much, but it does create a layer of abstraction on top of these three different standards, which may make it simple to integrate with these standards. And finding standards. So you can go to any NFT, like you grab its URL. At the top of the URL is the principal of the canister ID, right? And take that canister ID, go to icscan.io, put it in there, and it'll give you the interface to that canister, or to that NFT's canister, or that canister's NFT. Yeah. And so this is a pretty simple process, right? And I probably do this, I don't even know, 4 or 5 times a day easily, because every time there's a new NFT, it's like, what is the standard does it use? Do I need to implement something new? Is it just EXT? Is it DIP 721? Or is it just a CCC NFT? And there's a lot of other standards, but this is the quickest way to figure out what standard an NFT uses and what kind of work you need to do to integrate with that standard. And also, if you're developing a standard, it's pretty easy just to go here and figure out exactly how everyone implemented their specific NFTs. Let's see here. SocialFi, really let's see if there's any questions on NFTs. If you guys have questions in chat, just list them off and we can talk about it. If not, we will move on. Can you give a bit of vision on, so the question is, can you give a bit of vision you are working towards for displaying NFTs on Discover? What do you want the UI UX to look like? Yeah, right now, almost all our NFTs are PFPs on Discover. We're starting to NFT profile page, or trying to figure out a better way of describing it, like your NFT collection. That's one of the things that we're trying to figure out of a good way of displaying that on Discover, is like, here's a verified list of NFTs that I've collected, and I want to display them in my profile. So it's like, here's my top 5 or top 10 favorite NFTs. And like, the cool thing about gating an NFT verified ownership and getting the registry is that we can prove that this NFT I'm displaying is I own it without Discover needing access to the NFT, right? So with the Stoic wallet integration and the Plug wallet connect, both of those, as soon as we connect your Stoic wallet, we delete all the information. We just drop it. It never even touches our backend. And from the front end perspective, we terminate the storage data. So as soon as you verify that you own the Stoic wallet, we don't know anything else. And it's basically, we just sign a transaction on both ends. So from your Discover principal, from Discover principal plus your Stoic principal, maybe we make a request to the backend and say, hey, I'm going to pair this wallet. And then we reverse it, flip it and reverse it. And then make a request to the backend from your Stoic wallet to Discover saying this principal is associated with this principal. So once we've confirmed that both of these principals are related through a double transaction, pairing transaction, we then know that we can confirm that that's your Stoic wallet. And we don't want anything else to do with your Stoic wallet after that. We don't want to be able to perform transfers or any types of transactions. So that's how we kind of verify what you own. But I think the next step is creating a way that you can share your top 5 or top 10 NFTs and display them with inside of your profile. And I also think this service doesn't need to be built by Discover. I think someone could create like a basic canister where users can list and add and remove NFTs that they want to display on their Discover profile. And like that's the direction that Discover wants to go in. We want to be able to integrate with more services on the IC that kind of have social features. So like if you're a builder out there and you're like, wow, this would be really interesting if Discover had X, Y, or Z, but I think I could build it purely as a service. We would love to integrate with it. And we have different integrations on Discover, right? We have 20 or 30 different NFTs. DAO token access to Discover groups. Yeah, that's a good question. So the next question is, so what about DAO token access to Discover groups? Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting, right? So to make this simple, we'll talk about OG metals. So we know through the gating technology and users who have connected to the portal how many OG metals you actually own, right? And so Poke Studio has one of their gating rules. If you own 2 or more, you get a special role. And I think if you own 5 or more, you get a diamond role. Can't remember the name of the role. But like this actually correlates to voting too. We need transparency in our polls. And that's kind of the next, there's this huge governance push that's happening, hopefully releasing in 2 months from now. But the idea is you'll be able to vote directly with your NFTs on Discover. So if you're an OG Metals member, and you have OG Metals within inside of your wallet, your Stoic wallet or Plug wallet, or maybe your Discover airdrops. By the way, I suggest people just to use the Stoic wallet or Plug wallet and then connect it. There's no need to like keep everything in your airdrops on Discover, but we can verify that you own tokens 1, 2, and 3, right? Our future polls on Discover will allow you to vote with your 3 tokens. So once those 3 tokens have been voted with on Discover, they'll be burned for that poll. We're not removing your NFT. We'll just say on this specific poll, you voted with these 3 tokens. And what's important is that the token voted, not the user. Like we'll verify that you own the token, but like this way, if you transfer the token to other people, they can't vote on the same poll. But we'll have a public log of all of this on these polls. So the future poll of Discover is someone will, in the OG Lounge, create a poll that says, should Fabian create more video content for IC Bucks, or should Fabian create more video content for OG Metals, right? And everyone who's an OG poll or OG's metal holder will be able to vote with their actual token on Discover portals. And I think that's, to me, the first step to driving governance on Discover. The thing is like right now, polls are anonymous. Like the data is not anonymous. We have it in the backend, but I want to make another tab that like you voted with, you can see you can see the poll, and then another tab. And I know I'm such a programmer, and like I got tabs and buttons on everything. So there's always better ways to do UI UX, but some sort of other thing that you can click that shows you a list of who voted for what and how and what tokens they voted with, which is like the data it burns me up because the data is all there. We just got to display it and make it work right. There's also a bug with there's a bug with NFTs that have principles that end in 4, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I expect that to come out in a month or two. And the data's there. I think it's really a rendering problem. We're going through this complete UI refresh, which we've barely even started. But I think this is going to be high on the list of actually driving governance decisions inside of portals on Discover. So good question. Yep. Any other questions? Oh, awesome. So I think if you guys have any more NFT questions and they come up, there's also another thing too about token. Like when SNS comes out, 100%, it's going to be super important that social applications that want to drive governance integrate with the SNS and start like driving governance proposals. And there's this whole hotkey shenanigans that I think that could actually work with Discover portals and the SNS, but that's a whole other conversation. If anyone's interested in that, we could talk about it offline. So Socialify. So high level, there's 3 components to Socialify. It's like rewarding each other, monetizing your content, and community finance, right? It's like we're in this together, right? If you're building a Socialify platform where you're driving content, it's important that how are like the community, not only the content creator, but the community itself rewarded. Like we're in this together. Like your fans create you as much as you create your content, right? Because they're consumers of it. They are the ones that are driving the adoption to your content, right? So how is this like a mutually rewarding experience for everybody? And then how do you monetize your content? Like if I'm a content creator in a typical Web2 setting, like there's all these channels to actually monetize my content, which are not, they don't provide the transparency that you most likely desire. And it doesn't provide the direct monetization that you're actually looking for. Like it's just not explicit, right? That, hey, by developing content that here, I'm going to directly monetize myself. And there's channels where you can do that, like Patreon and possibly OnlyFans, but it's more interesting if we can figure out how to provide more transparency to content that needs to be monetized. And community finance, like what is the community actually doing? Like, how are you creating a tranche with all this, all these dollars that you're generating for your platform? And what is the community actually doing with it? So rewarding each other, we do this on Discover. We have airdrops to high quality contributors. We're trying to get better at this. It's always a trick, but how are you giving content away or giving away, Web3 primitives to your actual users? NFT gifting and posts and comments. From a SocialFi perspective, you have content. How do users see content that they like, and how do they reward that specific content, right? And that plays into peer-to-peer tipping also. But there needs to be that transparency there. Like, it's cool to see, it's a social setting, right? Like, it's cool to see that I saw something awesome that Andrew created. So I'm like, hey, this is cool. I'm going to give him a $5 tip, right? So there needs to be that element of really showing up to the user that, oh, this Rick Porter has tipped Andrew for this content he's created. But airdrops too, right? Airdrops typically come from the content creators themselves. So there needs to be that transparency there. Right now in Discover, there's not a lot of transparency in the airdrops. Like the who received what is public, but people typically don't know until people share it on Discover or post it on Twitter that, hey, I got this cool airdrop, right? And then everyone else is like, wow, where's my airdrop, right? But that kind of incentive cycle, or that it's pretty interesting. But gifting comes from the users. Peer-to-peer tipping can come from the users or the content creator themselves. But it's really about rewarding each other. Go ahead.
I guess it's hard to do with NFTs, to give the NFTs to people, because you kind of hold on to each of them, and each of them are unique. But you could do this, for example, with this SNS tokens that are fungible.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. We Jorgen Builder he built us NFT gifting. So our NFT gifting completely is built by an external service that we're completely integrated with. And it uses that kind of paradigm where the NFT is transferred to the canister, but it has a history of all the posts, a foreign key to all the posts that it's been associated with, which is interesting. And but what we found that is people are not super willing to gift $500 to $500 to a post, right? So until cheaper NFTs come out, which we have this whole thought about tipping is cool. If you just give someone 1 cent to $1, that's cool, and it looks fun. But I think there's something in the middle between NFTs and tipping. And I've talked to Bob and Easy Steve about this, talked to a lot of people about this, but they had a similar concept. I think they called them stackable NFTs. But if you're an NFT creator right now, what about stable NFTs, right? And this happens, this is nothing new. Go to TikTok, in a lot of the live streams, you'll see people tapping cherries and cakes and things like that, and they're streaming up. But those are actually NFT gifts to people on TikTok, right? And I think that it needs to exist definitely on Discover, but on social platforms. So it's
wait. You said stable NFTs, and then we went over it. I have to stop you. Stable NFTs? You have to elaborate on that.
So a stable NFT to me is I go buy this, and I go to Andrew's NFT shop, and I buy, and he has a whole bunch of beautiful NFTs, and I'm so happy to be at this location. I bookmark it instantly. But you sell NFTs, a cherry NFT. I don't know why it's a cherry, but it draws my eye. I buy it for $1. The cool thing about this NFT though is if I buy it for $1, I own it, I can display it, but I can burn it for 90 cents. Always, I can buy it for $1 and burn it for 90 cents. But why would I burn it for 90 cents? That doesn't make sense. I lose 10 cents. But maybe I use it as gifting, right? Instead of giving you $1 or 90 cents, I gift you this cherry. And so maybe it's a limited edition cherry though. So it's guaranteed to be sold, to be burnt for 90 cents, but only 10,000 were ever made, or maybe 5,000 were ever made. So as people are burning it, maybe it increases in rarity, but I'm guaranteed to always get that 90 cents. But where does the other 10 cents go? Maybe 5 cents goes to you, Andrew, as the creator of the NFT. And maybe 5 cents goes to the platform costs and fees, the cycle costs for running the canister. But to me, I think it's a more interesting approach, because to me, it's more fun. Just giving someone $1 feels weird. I mean, it's cool, and I'm glad that person has that $1, and hopefully people give them thousands of more dollars. But I think a cherry would be more fun, or a cake, some sort of emoji. So why can't I just give these stable NFTs to people on Discover, and we can create a micro economy around these stable NFTs where people are burning them and trading them, and maybe they have the typical NFT standards. So instead of burning it, I've got some, there's only 10,000 of these cherries created, and 9,999 of them were burnt, but I only have the one left. Well, it's probably going to be worth more than 90 cents. Maybe it's going to be worth $1.50. Who knows? But
so you can always sell a stable NFT for more than $1, but you can never, and you can always, you have the floor that is 90 cents if you want to burn it and get back your money.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's even if it's 90, maybe you get 95 cents, 2.5 cents goes to you too. These should be adjustable parameters. But at scale on social platforms, this could create an interesting scenario. Web 2 that has the same paradigm. And when they do pay people out, they take 50%. So if we take 5 to 10%, I mean, we're already well ahead of what's happening in Web 2. And obviously Web 2 has a lot of other caveats that require those excessive fees. I don't know how much of that 50% actually goes into costs before they actually get their money back, but let's just say 50% is pretty high. And I think this could create a creator economy. There's a lot of ways that this could create interesting scenarios, but I do think tipping and gifting for social is almost required, right? It's such a basic part of how we interact with each other that I think that we've got to create more interesting layers. Like straight up money, cool. Everyone appreciates money, but maybe there's more fun ways to gift. And if you actually think about it, like real world money is like NFTs, right? Like, I don't know if you're from the US, and I'm sure other countries do this, but like quarters are like, you can collect every, so we have 25 cents in the US, we call quarter. And on one side of the quarter is like a state, right? So like there's 50 states in the US, and so there's 50 unique types of quarters, and people would like collect them all. But isn't that weird? It's also like stable NFTs right there too, right? It's kind of fun. But and you always have like the Buffalo nickels and like older types of money in the US that is no longer, it's completely valid, but just no longer used, or it's out of circulation. So it's like we're still that those paradigms still exist. Let's see, we got a comment. Yeah, they have decorative 50p in the UK, right? And it's like people collect those. Like if you look up, I don't know enough about coin collectors, but like, they have like the silver nickel or whatever, or the silver dime, right? And I think the silver dime is worth like, instead of being worth 10 cents, it's worth like 20 cents or something, like what does it matter? But, in the paradigm of Web3, that kind of creates interesting scenarios, right? And it's more fun that way. Monetizing your content, you could create social tokens, and you could plug, like all these tokens can be plugged right into the SNS, right? It's up to you to figure out those tokenomics, but creator social tokens, community social tokens, gating your content, ad revenue sharing. We've got to figure out from a SocialFi perspective of how do we address each one of these. Creator social tokens are cool. Maybe Kyle, he's got a gated community set up where he's going to have a subscription to his NFTs, but there's always like so many, so that's like gating your content relative to a subscription. From a discover and social perspective, like the only question you care about, going way back to the standards that we talk about, is like, do they own the NFT? If they don't own it, they don't get access to it. So maybe like subscription-based NFTs expire. Creator social tokens, community social tokens. These are all ways to incentivize your community. And from a discover perspective, we are completely redoing our social token, like 100%. I really think that portals, like the communities themselves, need their own token. Like every portal on Discover probably needs to be eventually an SNS tokenized community. And then they decide the rules on how like people earn those tokens, right? And who are and all those types of checks and balances and rules, how are they baked into the contract? How are they baked into the upvotes? What type of community members can actually earn those? I think we need to come up with an unopinionated way of doing that and give the tools to the user to drive those decisions. But
so you will have a master SNS that is a discover token, and then you will have each portal optionally have their own SNSs within this controlling SNS.
Yeah, we've been talking about this, is super early thinking, and like I'm super okay actually with being wrong on this. And I think with SocialFi, if you're building in SocialFi right now, I'm sure whatever decision that we come up with now could be wrong in 6 months, maybe even a year. So just be okay with being wrong. I think when we started SocialFi over a year ago, the paradigm was there's a platform and it has a token, right? And but that's wrong. I think that's super wrong. Like, I feel like that just creates another application that is token driven, but like it doesn't really speak to the communities, the unique communities that are being developed on that platform, right? So I do think you need to tokenize the small communities. I still think there needs to be a larger token, but maybe the Discover token, right? And this is high level thinking. Maybe the Discover token's value is the value of the collection of all the tokens on the platform itself. So like you have 10 portals, each of them are tokenized through the SNS. Maybe Discover's token value actually correlates to the global value of all the tokens on the platform. And I mean, it's not like we created anything. I think the Eurodollar created that, or the Euro created that in the late 70s. But it's kind of interesting, right? Like that actually forces Discover and SocialFi platforms to create value out of their communities instead of value out of the platform itself. And so the total value of all the communities is the value of the Discover token itself. I think it's like in the world of Web3, you've got to like take everything you know about Web2 and kind of like flip it, and it's just like the world. We just got to think of the world a little bit about as backwards, but like it's because it seems so backwards because we're trying to put control into the user's hands and not into the company, the centralized company's hands anymore. Which, yeah, I mean, that's not, from that perspective, it seems right. So Poseidon asked, so would the Discover SNS kind of be like a canister, and all issued social tokens will be within that? But could such social tokens, example, Judgment DAO token, be able to exist? Yes, 100 exist outside of Discover. Yes. In fact, I actually want, it's like Discover is a social platform. Like we're building a social graph. We're building a social protocol. We need to integrate with the SNS. The social token, this token that you're describing, Poseidon, needs to exist outside of Discover. And for Discover to be successful, more things need to exist outside of Discover. We need a platform that integrates with the IC, integrates with Web3 applications. And so I think the social token that'll exist on Discover, like we could possibly create a basic token that could exist just within inside of your portal, but I would be interested to see your Judgment DAO token exist outside of Discover. Like I would appreciate if we could use your portal to integrate with the token in some way and gate your portal and drive voting decisions through your portal. But I do think future iterations of tokens will exist outside of Discover. Like Discover is a social platform, right? And we want to plug into the natively plug into the Web3 world. Does that answer your question, Poseidon?
Basically, Discover could be a secondary front end to the SNS dapp, because Infinity will produce their own front end SNS dapp similar to the NNS, and Discover is kind of a layer on top of that, and you can implement voting. And if you create your own SNS, Discover SNS tokens, then you have to, as a user, set up your inflation, your voting rewards, and so on.
I 100% agree. And actually, on the SNS, NNS. So yeah, 100% SNS. NNS has this like concept of a hotkey, and I haven't played with it fully, but like I was thinking, I wonder if it's possible to somehow link your Discover account to your NNS hotkey, and then somehow all the proposals show up as Discover posts. And then by you upvoting the Discover post or downvoting a Discover post, it actually correlates to an actual vote on the NNS. Because like a hotkey is intended for restricted use. And I was like, it's so ridiculous. I was like, I wonder what people would think if they saw this,
If you create a post, it would be a governor's proposal, and then people can vote on it by upvoting it.
Yeah, the amount of spam proposals.
Please don't do it. Don't do it.
That's so funny, right? But like with the hotkey on the NNS, it's 100% possible. Like this, I believe, I don't know enough about the hotkey, but I believe it is a secure, like a secure way of restricted vote access to a specific account, because it's like you don't want to give them full access to your account, but maybe just give them a hotkey and they can upvote, downvote proposals. But yeah, I think it would be hilarious. Uh,
I have a question relating. Oh, you found it on its own? Sorry.
Oh, wait, I've been looking into Steam and Diamond. Yep, blogging solutions lately. Some of it's really complex. For Alice and Bob, I kind of feeling that learning about lots of different kinds of money is too complex for Joe Public. Yeah, I agree. It's not all about open to the tax can of worms. Yeah, GSO app's pretty interesting. They have like a global currency on DSO. I haven't dived into it too much. But I do think like my I'm also concerned that like every portal has its own token, like like a Web2 user, how complex of a bridge is that, right? And I've gotten that feedback for very long time. Multi-token systems are extremely complex. People are already trying to wrap their head around Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then they find out that there's like actually thousands of tokens, and then they're like, oh shit, and then they go to a social platform where they're trying to feel comfortable, and feel like they're in their Web2 experience, and then we're like, oh, actually we are 1,000 tokens also. Yeah, it's a complex one.
And
So
also, you gotta be careful not to let scams be like not portals to be taken over by scams, because if everyone can have their own
yep.
Discover portal SNS, then that might lead to dark places.
I think we've got to have a whitelist, like to at first to kind of figure it out. I mean, the thing is like anyone will be able to create their own SNS, and hopefully Discover just somehow like plugs into it, and the user drives that decision of plugging into it. But like, I really think ICP Detectives, which is like probably one of my top favorite portals on Discover. I think there's going to be like those type of communities that are investigating like what is happening with other projects. Like somehow there's got to be a community way of driving the decision of trust, right? Like we've like there's how does that actually work? Like who are the actors that are driving these decisions, and who's watching the watcher? Like, and opens up a whole bunch of interesting questions. But yeah, I agree. Creates an interesting paradigm. Let's see. I think I have one more slide left. Community finance. Yeah. We really briefly talked about this. NFT PFPs. Like I think OG Metals did it really cool. They did OG Metals. They did a second release of IC Bucks. They rewarded the holders, and they created another NFT to bring in more types of users. They gave so the OG Metal users, I think, can post and comment, but I think only IC Bucks can comment, which is like we have full role-based access control on Discover. So you just give whatever access rights to whatever role. But I think like in SocialFi, it creates an interesting paradigm where like, you have multi-tiered community, you have communities based around an NFT, because NFTs are micro communities. And multiple NFTs can still play into community with different collection sizes, but it creates different access rights. NFTs is membership keys. I think Kyle is probably pioneering this right now. And you should definitely check out his crowdfunding. He posts some of the, like, I almost read every single thing that Kyle pushes out. I think I read every single one of his tweets. Very insightful stuff. But he's got this membership that he's releasing for his content. And I think that's going to start opening up interesting paradigms where people, I don't want to use the word influencer, but like prominent content creator, this is going to be an interesting way to monetize your digital footprint, right? Early access, early learnings, direct communication. I worked in crowdfunding for a while, and I did stuff for Rob Zombie. And it was so interesting how the community was so like, when he opened up channels to communicate with them, and Rob was an amazing human being. He talked to people, he was human with them, he listened to them. But when he opened up those channels, Web3 Patreon, he opened up those channels. People want that. they want that ease of access. They want to be able to drop into their favorite influencer or content creator and have a real conversation with them. And I think Web3 is going to open up more powerful tools to facilitate that communication. And we're so early in this. Like, we've been talking about this for years, but like, it's just starting to happen, and it's going to take a while to get there. But I do know that like, we can natively do this natively Web3 do this on the internet computer. Like, that's the craziest thing about it, is like, we don't have to have centralized servers or centralized front ends. We can natively do that with the NFT standards I described above. We can natively do that on an internet computer so completely decentralized. Okay, cool. And I think I have community shared wallet DAO. This is interesting. But like, and it makes sense. It's a treasury, it's like, but like, what are users doing with the treasury? Like, if you think about from a Discover portal perspective, right? There's a treasury for the community, but like, and you can vote and drive decisions. Maybe you're throwing dope parties, please invite if you do, but maybe you are doing something more responsible. Sometimes a party could be responsible, but maybe you're doing something more responsible, like and doing development with inside of your DAO, adding features, developing, hiring a UI UX to improve the look and feel of whatever your DAO is governing. Maybe you're putting your treasury is financing more NFTs to create more value for your project, but there's a lot that a community shared wallet can do. And maybe the wallet just stores NFTs, right? And maybe the NFTs are randomly distributed to the users over time, which is an interesting scenario in itself. I do think there's so much that we can do on the IC with shared wallets and community DAOs. I mean, we literally have the lowest transaction fees. We've got to get really creative with it. And I don't know if I have, so I have this quick one on NFTs are micro communities, OG Lounge. We've already spoke about this, but these are all crypto native communities. Like, we don't need to have a bunch of centralized servers and whatnot to actually make this work. That's it. Questions?
I have one that I think would be very useful for our hackers and developers. So basically, the idea, if I'm building the next large social media dapp on the IC and I'm implementing the SNS, as I think most of you should, how can I make sure that I wouldn't only reward people who are staking their custom SNS tokens, but also I give out enough tokens that it doesn't inflate the value of my custom token away, one, and then two, my social dapp doesn't become just a platform for spamming and people racing to get some of my custom tokens for interactions, like the incentive structure of the users and the inflation together.
Yeah, what's interesting is I think I have a better answer for the second part. Like, building out a whitelist for your users, to me, is in SocialFi, because of the anonymity of things, is going to be super important, right? Like, we've got to figure out how to allow people to designate themselves as a trusted user. Like, we're forming our digital footprints right now on the IC, right? Like, we have our Web 2 digital footprints, but our Web 3 digital footprints still need to be fleshed out a lot better. And that could correlate to NFTs that you already own, DAOs that you already participate in. If you're already participating in the what is it called? The ICP Detectives Forum, they're working better on like, how do they filter out users? But that's kind of, to me, like the first step of like creating a trusted community of members completely in Web3 that actually want to drive voting decisions and things like that together. But I do think your digital footprint, which opens up whole other paradigms, but you're like, from a Discover perspective, the portals that you're members of and the roles that you have are starting to form the value of your digital footprint, or the purpose of your digital footprint. And I think that actually speaks into the inflationary mechanic too, is like it's really about creating that trusted user, you know. There's a lot of other paradigms too within that question, but I think they can get a little off the rails.
Right. So you want to create a kind of an inner platform digital score for people. Yep. That is somehow central enough that each person has one digital score or number of digital tokens, and it translates from Discover to District to other social media dapps.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the way, like, or a similar path. Yeah, it's if you could play it into an NFT, like connect an NFT to multiple platforms, because there's DSocial, you know, people contributing to DSocial, District, Tagger, Discover, and I think in a year from now there'll be like, hopefully there'll be 10x that, you know, there'll be a lot of us, and I think this is going to start forming. Somehow you're going to have to connect the dots between these between all these platforms. Like, it is an interesting scenario. Is like, I love this. I love the thought of this, because like I could really create a whole new identity for myself. As long like if I'm a good actor on all these platforms, I could really recreate my digital identity. And I think without having to bind myself to a real world person. And I think that's powerful, because it's like, I think humans are just far too complex to have like a single persona, a single identity. It just feels weird. Like sometimes we get like, I feel like I get tired of being myself. I'm sure other people get tired of just being themselves all the time. You want to go somewhere and just be someone, you don't just not have to be yourself all the time. So yeah. Has anyone approached some of the BTC merchant solutions to see if they can implement credit card payments on the IC? Yeah, I don't know. I think that would be interesting though. You know, I live in Oregon State. Marijuana dispensaries, or dispensaries in general, mushroom and marijuana dispensaries. I think a lot of them, like if you swipe your credit card at these places, they take, it's actually an ATM. You know, they don't have like a credit card. They have a credit card reader, but you're actually like swiping your card as an ATM. So it's like that when they hand you a device, it's an ATM, you're actually paying. So if something costs like $59, they're going to give you $1 back, because it's, you know, ATMs only take things out in even amount of increments, right? For $20. But I think it's Litecoin. I believe it's Litecoin on the back end. And the dispensary I go to, I'm pretty sure it's all Litecoin. So when you swipe your card, you're swiping at an ATM, and the money in the back end is converted into Litecoin. And I'm not sure how they trade or sell it, or if it's instantly sold or bought. But like we in the US, we suffer from the federal state problem. So federally, marijuana is illegal, but on state level, it's legal. So banks are federally regulated, therefore they can't always hold money. So they have to figure out clever tricks for actually holding their money. But yeah, I think, yep.
One of these Supernova partners called Simplex has a fiat on and off ramp solution. And eventually what we could do, they could implement, or any developer could implement their API and then just have the crypto conversion happen kind of seamlessly. So you pay with a fiat, and then you can buy an IC NFT on Entrepro if Entrepro implements them. There are some fees associated with it, because then the banks get involved, but something like this could exist.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of exploration that could take place inside of this, and that stuff sounds like a really cool project. It's awesome to hear about like some of the innovation happening right now. Yep. I'll take that credit. Sounds awesome. Get some new ways of thinking. See the world from a different perspective, right? Cool.
I have one last question, and then we can wrap up afterwards. We're 5 minutes over time anyways. So as a developer of a social dapp myself, how should I think about sustainable funding of a dapp? Because you don't want to rely on necessarily VC funding for a long time. So How would you say SNS and tokenization can help with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you got to figure out, once you figure out your tokenomics model, right? And you've got to figure out how do you play value back into the token itself. Like how does value return to the token? Inflationary, deflationary mechanics, right? But like, by launching applications with an SNS, you can build up tranches within inside of the value of your token. So it's like, I think they call it the pie chart. And it's really like, what are the different within inside of your pie chart and how, the total value of your token. So 100% of your token, what percent of it is owned by the community? What percent of it is owned by the foundation? What percent of it is owned by the team? And what percent of it has been used to go raise money? So possibly some form of VC money, right? And then you've got to figure out, like, if you figured out your tokenomics, then how do you set up your company structure so that you can finance the team to actually build out this product? And there's a lot of tricks in that, but I do believe, as SNS gets closer, and it's very close from what I hear, the community will work together on exploring how do we actually, what are the mechanics for different types of users to actually, extract value out of their token to, like, keep the lights on in their apartment or house, and grow value for these tokens specifically.
All right. I think that wraps it up. Thank you very much, Rick. I feel like you have so much to say that we could basically do this once a week and we wouldn't run out of content for a very, very long time.
Yeah, this is so fun. Like, developing on the IC, I always tell people, Discover has probably been one of my, from a career perspective, one of the most rewarding career experiences I've had. It's just like every day there's a new challenge. It's frustrating, but like at the end of the frustration, there's happiness. There's new problems to solve. It's just such a roller coaster. But you know what? The roller coaster hasn't stopped, and it's constantly just like giving feedback and rewarding you. So we've been at this for a while now. I think I don't even know when this really started. So if you're starting your journey now of developing on the IC, it's like episode 1 of an epic TV series, and I'm only on season 2 or 3, and it's like fucking real good. So we've got a lot more seasons to go, so it's gonna be great.
Also, you see the community on Discover being built day by day, and the interactions within them. So it must be really fulfilling to have that in front of you every day.
Yeah, and the community is amazing. So I hang out in the DFINITY Dev Discord more than the forum. Like, I check the forum every day, but there are people in there who will answer your question within a day, and a lot of times way quicker. Be incredibly nice to them because they are really holding the line out there, but they're available and they're there and they're insightful. So, like, even I lose track of everything going on. When IC Rocks went down, I was like, where to go? As soon as I jumped into DFINITY Dev Discord, there's already conversations happening on the next iteration of it. So it's like I definitely feel like we are all in this together and we're all trying to win together. So, District is another big platform on the IC, and I talk to them 2-3 times a week. They're great at, hey, I'm running into this problem. District's like, hey, we ran into this. Here's solutions for that. I think the vice versa is happening too. But like, we're all working together on this, and we're all trying to push this together forward. So I just like, if you're a new developer, jump on board. So we're gonna win together. And I know that's like such a meme right now, but like, it's a real meme. So deal with it. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rick, for the great presentation and answering our questions. And thank you very much for our guests who attended and asked very, very nice questions. So yeah, let's do this again sometime, maybe after Supernova.
All right. Later, guys.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.